So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga chapter 372, and let's just say that we are still once again focusing on the battle between Shoji and Spinner, but we have a twist at the end of the chapter that pretty much is going to be a final decision that could change the tide of this war to the villain's favor. And we'll talk about that soon enough, but first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Drew, and I'm here to talk about this chapter of My Hero Academia Manga chapter 372, titled Naked. Okay, I promise you, no one naked is in this chapter. Technically, but we'll be getting to that soon enough. But when it comes to this chapter of My Hero Academia, I think that this was once again a really good chapter because we are once again still focusing on the racism and discrimination aspect of this story, but we are getting a little bit more information about the characters involved, specifically when it comes to Koda, how this entire setup and the reasoning why Shoji and Koda are even here, as well as finally setting up how Spinner is actually going to be playing a crucial role in this war that could turn the tides in the villain's favor. So, let's dive into this chapter and really talk about what's going on with My Hero Academia and the racism plotline. And for starters, we actually start off this chapter with a flashback of Koda and Shoji pretty much saying that, hey, we know what's going on at General or Central Hospital, we want to be there. And that this information was actually given to Shoji by the giant woman. And this is very interesting because this is kind of something that was kind of in a way foreshadowed many chapters ago before the war actually started. Because we actually saw Shoji interacting with this giant woman before the war, or specifically before the students actually properly left and went to Troy. So that setup with that giant woman was to basically set up what we got in this chapter, which is that she told Shoji, as well as Shoji telling Koda, what's going on with the mutant-based quirk users and how they will be invading General or Central Hospital, and that they are determined to participate in that battle because of what we learned in the last chapter, because he doesn't want mutants as well as those who have deformities through heteromorphic quirks to be persecuted by this heinous action that they will be committing. And then you just have Aizawa allowing for this to happen as long as President Mike is there to back them up, which leads to a very cool speech from Yamada saying that even though these kids are still kids, that they were way stronger than what they were able to and are capable of when they were kids. And he says this literally as we are setting up for both Koda as well as Shoji to deliver massive blows on their enemy. Where weirdly enough, we also get a minor Koda flashback, and this is something that I was not expecting at all. And pretty much what this flashback is setting up is that when it comes to Koda, he could get a power boost from his horns that allows him to relay his feelings to animals without necessarily speaking, which is actually hilarious for Koda's character, who was pretty much introduced into this world as being a very shy individual. But what's even more interesting about this is that his mom instilled something into Koda that kind of sets up Koda's entire arc from what we've seen. And how she was younger, she was bullied for her horns, and how this sets up for why Koda is being so angry and emotional in this fight, because his mother told him that he needs to be angry for those who try to laugh at the people that he cares about. Which sets up a few things. One, this is kind of setting up for why Koda has become more and more open with his feelings as the story goes on. Because as he's grown more attached and cared about the class, his emotions were able to come out more. Which leads to the point where he's now able to express his emotions, and his anger, which is from what we're seeing, was the catalyst for awakening his horns. But what is even more interesting is the fact that his father, who, as we see in this flashback, is human in nature or human looking, defended his mother from these accusations. And this is probably how we're going to be getting more of this discrimination as well as these racism plotlines not necessarily resolved, but to show a solution for them. and that this ties into the idea of what hero society was versus what it needs to be, and how you can't just have the heroes being the ones to play hero, you need everyone to play hero and not continue to be bystanders. And like how KODA'S father stood up for his eventual heteromorphic wife, other people need to stand up against those who try to discriminate and hurt heteromorphic quirk users to show that there are still people in this world that care about them. So I think this is what KODA'S flashback is setting up, and is pretty much enunciating or emphasizing this idea of what's going to be the solution to solve not just the problems with heteromorphic quirk users, but the entire flaw and problems with hero society. So that's something that I really wanted to talk about, but also we just get a whole bunch of cool action in this chapter as we see both KODA as well as Shoji deliver powerful moves upon their enemies, which my favorite being KODA'S, which he calls Hitchcock birds. And if you don't know what this is referencing, get a little bit more cultured. It's actually from a movie called Hitchcock the Birds, which is pretty much the premise of the entire movie, is that birds decide to take over and attack humans, and that when it comes to that fact, and if they are able to do that, there's nothing that us as humans can actually do about it, due to the fact that they are able to fly in the air and they are extremely hard to hit, which leads to a lot of death and carnage. So yeah, that's the reference, and also Shoji's potential reference to his attack of Octo expansion could actually be a reference to Splatoon. So cool! More references in My Hero Academia that are not necessarily Star Wars themed, and are actually very appropriate for the situations at hand. So yeah, we're getting a lot more of Shoji in this chapter with his speech after that attack, and I think that people are misunderstanding and misrepresenting what Shoji is trying to say and what he's doing, which is that he's not saying that the heteromorphic quirk users should not be angry and they shouldn't voice their grievances, but that what they need to do is actually channel their anger to do something that is actually productive. That they need to channel their anger into what they need to protect, instead of just attacking a literal hospital and being not a protest, but a riot. Which is something that I've heard people say about these individuals. No, they are not protesters, they are rioters. That is a major distinction for why they are in the wrong. Along with the fact that even though that they are angry about being discriminated against and racism, why would that involve you attacking a hospital? So yeah, you pretty much have Shoji saying this, as well as he brings up the fact that if they continue to do this, the people that will suffer will not necessarily be them, but the children, because obviously sins of the father is a very critical thing that many people adhere to, even though they shouldn't. As we even get a small flashback of the little girl that he saved, and how she says that the reasoning why Shoji got these scars is because he saved her from drowning, and that if that didn't happen, then Shoji would definitely not have gotten the beatings. Which is actually something very interesting, because it ties into information that we got in the, wait for it, My Hero Academia Ultra analysis about this being the case, but we actually get a different context for it. And we see that in this chapter, Shoji's words have finally gotten to the individuals in the crowd. However, Spinner is still not done. He is able to rile up the people once again to follow his side, as he talks about how people will never care about them, and that if the heroes win, nothing will change, and that they will still be attacked, and that they need to raise their voices and follow him as he heads towards Central Hospital, as many of the other individuals are still following him, but are very hesitant at this moment. As the chapter is approaching its end, we get a really disturbing scene of a individual, specifically a police officer, thinking that the rioters are getting fired up, that they really don't have a chance, and that he pulls out a gun and we hear gunshots ring. Now, we don't know if they actually shot at any of these people, but the implication is that they are aiming for them, and that this is going to be something that Horikoshi needs to handle correctly. Because the police just firing on a crowd of people, just inherently on its own, is a negative connotation. even though they may be rioters, this could be seen as using too much force to restrain them, and that this could lead to something that could not really be handled well if Horikoshi doesn't handle it correctly. But even after all of those gunshots, you just have Spinner trying to rescue Kurogiri with the words of All For One going through his head about how if Kurogiri gets rescued, that will end this war. And that the way that he's going to activate Kurogiri is that he needs to play a recording of both All For One or of Tomura's voice. And here's where we get a very impactful scene in this chapter, because as Spinner is thinking that he will become a hero for Tomura's sake, and he thinks that he's doing the right thing for Tomura, we have finally the heteromorphic quirk users that are trying to invade the hospital come to a realization of how in the wrong they are in. As they are in the hospital, they literally see multiple individuals, both nurses and doctors, trying to prevent them from potentially harming patients. And how, as you just have this one individual with a pig-like face looking at another individual that looks like a Yoshi, they finally come to realize, oh, we are severely in the wrong, which makes what we get immediately afterwards even more hurtful. Because Spinner is just elated. He's thinking that he's in the right. He's thinking he's going to be someone. He thinks that everything is going to be alright, and that he wants to show Tomura that everyone is following him and that he's finally someone, as we get this one beautiful page, probably very reminiscent of Dabi's dance, as we see that there is literally no one behind him and that he is alone, or as the title of this chapter is, he's naked. There's nothing that is a part of him, nothing that is really there to support him. And as the chapter ends, you just have Spinner coming to a realization as we hear a voice coming from behind him that when it comes to the voices, they have reached them, and that he will not allow for Shirokumo to be his trump card, because out of the darkness comes President-like Yamada, and at the end of this chapter, a double page spread of both Kurogiri and Shirokumo being yelled by Spinner and Present Mike, as one of their voices will reach him and something amazing will happen. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that happened in this chapter, and let me just say that this final page is really setting up an idea that I had involving what's going to be happening with Kurogiri, Shirokumo, and that most likely than not, he will respond with Shirokumo, but by doing so, will actually bring Aizawa here, and Aizawa being brought to the hospital will mean that either way, Shigaraki Tomura will be able to unleash his full power, and that is going to be horrible for the sake of the heroes. But when it came to this chapter, overall, I thought that this was a really good chapter. For once, it tackles more of the idea of what Shoji is trying to say, most likely with this version of the translations, about how he's not necessarily angry that the people are rioting or are riled up because of the racism and discrimination, but when it comes to their anger, they are not directing it at the right sources, and that what they are doing by attacking the hospital isn't justified. As well as what I liked is that this chapter via Koda also builds up the themes of how hero society should be and what it's going to eventually lead to, not just heroes standing up for other individuals, but everyone standing up for anyone and everyone, as well as getting to see that he gets a power boost of his horn breaking open, and then it's very much inspired by his mother, which could be sort of kind of tying into his original flashback of his mother hugging him for being a hero, because she was kind of an inspiration for him. As well as we get to see the civilians, specifically the rioters, finally come to a realization that they are in the wrong, leaving Spinner alone with a very impactful scene, leading to the end of this chapter of potentially Kurogiri or Shirokumo awakening to one of these two parties, meaning one of two people will eventually be warped to this location, and whoever it's going to be is going to leave devastation in their wake. And along with the cool action, this was just a really cool and solid chapter that I really enjoyed. and hopefully you enjoyed as well. So let me ask you, what did you think of the chapter? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? What did you think of the final scene with Spinner and him being alone? What is the symbolism in that? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below, leave a like on the video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!